So this morning, I want to start with a little bit of a backup review. Obviously, we covered chapters 1 and 2 last week. And I sent home a little quiz. We're going to go over the quiz answers with you. First of all, did you find my quiz questions to be a little bit different than the level of questioning at the end of the chapters? Yes. Significantly different, right? That is what you can anticipate. As I told you, the questions at the end of the chapters are useful because they'll kind of get what you know and don't know from a very just sort of basic fact-based thing. But as far as the application goes, my quizzes are much better indicators of what you can expect on the exam at the end of the class and the state exam. So you need to really sort of be buckling down and making sure you're ready to tackle those level of questions. So the first thing we're going to do today is to teach you how to tackle that level of question on one of the subjects that you've already covered. You guys remember last week we talked about ownership interests. Hopefully you remember that, right? We talked about the different types of ownership interests. There's 7 of them total. Remember we said that ownership's not just one big, one-size-fits-all. There's 7 different types of ownership we could have. What is the best type of ownership someone could have? Fee simple absolute. And fee simple absolute means that the grantor, the person who's transferring title, has not put any limits on what 2 things. The time that the new owner is going to own the property, or the what? The use that the new owner can engage in on the property. Remember, it's about what the grantor says. It's about what the grantor says. And when a grantor gives fee simple absolute title, they are transferring title that they have not placed any limitation of time or use on. Is everybody good with that? So obviously the other 6 types are going to be some way of limiting what? One of 2 things. Time or use. That's where the 7 total different types of ownership come from. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on this, but number 1, it's going to be tested. It's not going to be tested like, you're not going to get 8 questions from this. You're probably going to see 1, maybe 2 questions from this. So it seems like we're spending too much time on it. But this is meant to get your brain engaged in the kind of critical thinking that you're going to have to apply to be able to answer these test questions. It's all about applying. When we talk about rules, you have to memorize the rule, but that's not enough. You got to memorize the rule and then be able to apply it to what you're doing. So if I were to give you a scenario, which I'm going to do in just a second, and you have to decide what kind of ownership it is, what do you think the first question you need to ask yourself is going to be? Did the grantor do what? Did they limit time or use or neither? If they limited neither, what kind of ownership is it going to be? It's going to be fee simple absolute. Is that, everybody follow me on that? So the first question you have to ask yourself is, did the grantor limit use or time? If they didn't, then it's fee simple. If they did, which one? Because if they limited time, what is it going to be? Some type of what? Life estate. Don't be afraid to answer them. It's going to be some type of life estate if they limited time. If they limited use, it's going to be either fee simple, determinable, or subject to a condition. Does that make sense? So let's say they're limiting time. If they're limiting time, we know it's a life estate. But that only gets us narrowed down to what? 4 different things, because there's 4 different kinds of life estates. So then the next question you have to ask yourself is it a conventional life estate or is it a life estate for autre? What is the difference between those 2 things? Say that again, London. 2 different people in what roles? What are the 2 roles? You're right, by the way. What are the 2 roles that we're saying 2 different people? She said 2 different people in poor autre. Is that right? It is. The life tenant is one person, and the measuring life is what? Is another person. That's a poor autre life estate. Is everybody with me on that? So what is a conventional life estate? They are the same person. The life tenant and the measuring life is the same person. Once you've answered that question, you know it's conventional or you know it's poor autre. What's the last question you need to answer about a life estate? Is it, well, not inheritable, that's sort of around If there's a remainder interest or there's a what? Reversionary interest. A remainder interest is an interest that the grantor did what? They assigned someone, they specified someone, and then it goes to fill in the blank, right? Then it goes to Tommy. In that case, Tommy is the what? Remainder interest. What if the grantor doesn't specify where it goes? What kind of interest is it? That's a reversionary interest. Is everybody following me? You see how you can't just read this thing and go, that's that. You have to like progress yourself through, and so much of this class is built like that. If the grantor limited use, well, you can eliminate all the life estates, right? You can eliminate fee simple, you can eliminate life estates. That only leaves you with two choices: fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to a condition. So what question are you going to ask yourself then? Did the grantor say what I can do or what I cannot do? Remember, those are the two words that matter there. If the grantor said what I can do, what is it? Determinable. If the grantor said what I cannot do, it is what? Subject to a condition. Y'all remember that discussion from last week? Well, we're about to find out how well you remember. So the first thing I want you to do is pull a staple out of this packet. You're going to unstaple this. This is your deck of cards. Everybody's card deck has 7 cards in it. Coincidentally, the 7 things we just talked about. What I'm going to do is put 7 ownership scenarios up on the screen, one at a time. And you're going to have to put them in the correct order. Each type of ownership is used once and only once. So there's one that matches. Does everybody see where we're going with this? So at the end of the game, you should have all 7 of them stacked in the same order as what my scenarios are in. Does that make sense to everybody? And then we'll go back and see how you did with it. So we're going to take about 30 seconds to 45 seconds on each one, maybe a minute on each one, to give you time to decide which one it is. The key here is it will get harder as you go deeper in, right? People say, oh, it should be easier, I got fewer choices. The problem's going to be, you'll probably get to one later and you'll go, I already used that one. You know what? So you got to rethink. Remember, you use it each one once and only once. I promise, each one of these 7 is a separate type of ownership. Are you ready? Not yet? We're taking a second for Martina. She's good now. All right. All right. Here we go. You ready? All right. Scenario number 1. We get down to them here. All right. Scenario number 1. Travis wishes to deed a property over to Catherine with the stipulation that Catherine may not use the property for the purpose of establishing a hog farm at any time in the future. Travis wishes to deed a property over to Catherine with the stipulation is just like qualification or statement, that Catherine may not use the property for the purpose of establishing a hog farm at any time in the future. So you're going to pull that one out of your packet, you're going to turn it over. Because it's eliminated. Remember to work yourself through the questions. Did the grantor limit time? Did the grantor limit use? Or did the grantor not limit anything at all? Ready? Number 2. Uchan is selling her family's farm to Bo, who will have ownership for a limited duration of time. And Uchan has left provision that future ownership will end up in the hands of Christine. Bo's time of ownership will be limited based on his own lifespan. John is selling the family farm to Bo, who will have ownership for a limited duration of time, and Uchan has left provision that future ownership will end up in the hands of Christine. Bo's time of ownership will be limited based on his own lifespan. Okay, ready? Made a choice. Third one. Omar has been gifted ownership of a property that will terminate upon his death. Omar has been gifted ownership of a property that will terminate upon his death. Short and sweet. I see somebody's starting to look back at stuff they've already eliminated. Ask yourself the questions we talked about, right? See, don't let your brain spin out of control. That's where you are. They're sucker in the palm of their hand, these people that write these standardized tests. Because they know that's what you do. You're like, squirrel. You know, like you just all over them. You have to discipline yourself. You're asking yourself very simple questions, but in a very important order, right? Did the grantor limit something? That's a yes or no question. If they limited something, then what did they limit? And then you just narrow it down. Okay. 5 more seconds. Not a memorization class. I don't like it. Number 4. Sammy is purchasing a hunting reservation in eastern North Carolina. The state of North Carolina has rules and regulations regarding the use of such premises, as does Edgecombe County where the property is located. The grantor of the reservation makes these limitations clear to Sammy, who proceeds with the transaction anyway. So Sammy is purchasing some hunting land. The state has rules, the county has rules. The grantor tells Sammy about the rules, and Sammy buys it anyway. Ask yourself the same series of questions. Did the grantor limit anything? If so, what did they limit? Christina is gifting a parcel of land to her cousin for a time period that will end with the death of the cousin's oldest child. At the conclusion of this time period, Christina expects that ownership will return to her or her heirs. Christina is gifting a parcel of land to her cousin for a time period that will end with the death of the cousin's oldest child. At the conclusion of this time period, Christina expects that ownership will return to her or her heirs. take you less time on each one, right? You have fewer choices available. All right, the next one. Shanika has obtained ownership of a parcel of land which she's obligated to continue using for the purposes of a park if she wishes to maintain her freehold interest. What's that word freehold mean? It just means ownership, right? If she wishes to continue to own the property, that's what a freehold interest is. Don't let fancy terminology be confusing. If she wishes to continue owning the property, she has to continue obligated using it as a park. Listen, if you know this one and you know you already used it, go get it out. At least get one right. Right? Yeah, that earlier one might be wrong, but if you know for sure what this one is, you better go find it, because that's what this one is. I think this one is probably the most straightforward in the bunch, by the way. If you've actually learned these rules and you're applying, this one's the most straightforward. There's a big difference between memorization and application, is there not? If you don't believe it, go swing a bat and try to hit a baseball. Somebody can tell you all day long to do it, but until you've done it, or a golf ball, or any kind of skill like that. Can somebody tell you how to sew? Yeah, they can tell you. Guess what? You can't do it until you do it. It's all about application. It's all about applying it, thinking your way through it. Teresa inherited ownership of a home when her mother passed away. The last one. Teresa's mother had inherited ownership of the home for the duration of her sister Tammy's lifetime. Tammy is Teresa's aunt and is still alive, though living in a nursing facility. Upon Tammy's death, ownership of the home will go to a charity located in Knoxville. I think this is the most complex of them. I left it last for a reason, so hopefully it should be easy because you only got one to choose from. Of course, if you're flipping and doubting yourself, it's significantly harder. No, I cannot put them all at the same time because that is not the way this test works. I will go back through them though and allow you one last peek before you submit your final responses. You ready? Let's run through them one more time. Okay? Number one. Travis wishes to deed a property over to Catherine with the stipulation that Catherine may not use the property for the purpose of establishing a hog farm at any time in the future. Probably the second, either easiest or second easiest one of the batch. I can't tell you. It's for you. I'm going to tell you the answers, yeah. I'm just running through them again so everybody got one last chance. Number two, Uchan is selling her family's farm to Bo, who will have ownership for a limited duration of time, and Uchan has left provision that future ownership will end up in the hands of Christine. Bo's time of ownership will be based on his own lifespan. Look at what you chose for number two and see if that makes sense still. All right, number three, Omar has been gifted ownership of a property that will terminate upon his death. Terminate upon his death. Number four, Sammy's purchasing a hunting reservation or hunting land in eastern North Carolina. The state of North Carolina has rules and regulations regarding the use of such premises, as does Edgecombe County where the property is located. The grantor tells Sammy about these restrictions and Sammy buys it anyway. Christina is gifting a parcel of land to her cousin for a time period that will end with the death of the cousin's oldest child. At the conclusion of this time period, Christina expects that ownership will return to her or her heirs. Six, Shanika has obtained ownership of a parcel of land which she's obligated to continue using for the purpose of a park that she wishes to maintain for a freehold interest. She can use the property as a park. That's cheating. And then finally, Teresa inherited ownership of a home when her mother passed away. Teresa's mother had inherited ownership of the home for the duration of her sister Tammy's lifetime. Tammy is Teresa's aunt and is still alive and living in a nursing facility. Upon Tammy's death, ownership of the home will go to a charity located in Knoxville, Tennessee. She only got one left anyway. Now, you saw them twice. I know you all got them right, right? You thought you knew them until I showed you you didn't, right? See, this is an important life lesson for this class. At the end of this class, when you take this exam, you'll say things like, that's ridiculous. I know this stuff. These questions are so tricky. Here's the thing. Sometimes you think you know something, you don't really know it. Because, quite honestly, there was only one or two in here that even had any trickiness about them at all. Actually, the trickiest one is the fee simple absolute one. The trickiest one I did in this whole pack was the fee simple absolute, and I did that intentionally because fee simple absolute is too simple on its own, right? I had to do something to gussy it up. The rest of them are pretty dang straightforward about what they are. Look at this first one. Is the grantor restricting something? Yes. Are they restricting time or are they restricting use? Okay, so they're restricting something. What can you eliminate? It's not what? It's not fee simple. It's not fee simple absolute. Does that make sense? Because there's a restriction. What are they restricting? Use or time? Use. So what can you eliminate? Forget what it is. I want to eliminate things. What can I eliminate? All of the what? All of the life estates go away. If you've got a life estate, you're on the wrong hunt right here because life estates limit what? Time. This is a limitation of use. So, did they tell her what she, or did they tell Catherine what she could do or what she could not do? What she could not do, and what's that called? Be simple, subject to a condition. That is be simple, subject to a condition. Okay? Wind down. Uchine is selling her family's farm to Bo, who will have ownership for a limited duration of time. That should jump out at you in red flashing letters right now, right? Right away, is the grantor limiting something? Yes, time. So what are we talking about? Some type of life estate. This is a life estate because it's limited time, and that's the only thing that limits time. So now what do we need to decide? Is it a conventional life estate or is it a what? Life estate for autre V. So what's going to be the difference between those two? What two people are we looking for? The life tenant and the measuring life. Well, who's the life tenant? Bo is the life tenant, right there. Selling it to who? Bo. Remember, the life tenant is the what? Owner of the property. Bo is the life tenant, who will have ownership for a limited amount of time. Bo's time of ownership will be limited based on what? His life. So who's the measuring life? Bo. Same person. What is that? That is a conventional life estate. We're not done yet. So now we know it's a conventional life estate. Everybody all right with that? The question now is it remainder interest or is it what? Reversionary. What does reversionary mean? It's going to go where? Back to the original grantor. Is that what's happening here? No. Who's it going to? To a remainder interest. This is a conventional life estate with a remainder interest. You have to progress through those questions one at a time. Don't try. This is too much to digest all at once. That's the problem. You want to answer quickly. Are you hungry? That's a question you can answer. Are you hungry? Do you want steak? Do you want fries? Do you want a large cook? Do you want a small cook? Do you want dessert with that? If somebody asked you like that, what would you say? Back the hell up. Let me ask this one at a time. But see, that's why you struggle on a standardized test, because there's really like 10 questions you need to answer in here, but y'all try to do it all at once. You can't. You have to break it down into pieces that you can digest. Does that make sense? Okay? All right. So let's look at the next one then. Omar has been gifted ownership of a property that will terminate upon his death. Has the grantor placed any limitation? They haven't? When does his ownership terminate? On his death. If you don't place any limitation, how long does his ownership last? Forever. Your ownership does not end when you die. Nobody comes and takes your stuff when you die. It's still your stuff. Don't you get to decide what happens to it? Generally speaking. So if your ownership terminates when you die, what was limited about your ownership? Time. This is a life estate. This is a life, just because it was the shortest one doesn't automatically mean it's fee simple absolute. I hate to tell you. But which life estate? Well, what's the next question you have to ask yourself about a life estate, Jocelyn?
The next question I have to ask, if it's a life estate, is there's no provisionary.
That's the end question. What's in the middle? You need to know if it's what? Conventional or autre.
Yes.
What makes the difference between those two?
Well, it's not for oh, it could be. Oh, because Omar is the...
What is Omar?
He is the life tenant.
Okay, and what is he also?
I got you.
He's the life tenant and he's the what? Maiden life. What kind of life estate do we have here? Is this conventional or is this per autre? This is a conventional life estate. And what's going to happen to the property at the end of the life estate? Is it going to a remainder interest or is it reverting back to the grantor? It is reverting back to the grantor. This is a conventional life estate with a reversionary interest. Alright, the fourth one. Sammy's purchasing a hunting reservation in eastern North Carolina. The state of North Carolina has rules and regulations regarding the use of such premises, as does Edgecombe County, where the property is located. The grantor of the reservation makes these limitations clear to Sammy, who proceeds with the transaction anyway. Trixie right here. Is the grantor limiting anything?
No.
No. The grantor has not placed a single restriction on this ownership. Are there restrictions? Yeah. From who? The state, the county. Those are called laws. They're always there. Has the grantor restricted anything? No. What is this? Fee simple absolute. See, I want you to get out of this mindset of fee simple absolute means I can do whatever the heck I want to do whenever I want to do it. That is not fee simple absolute. No property in the world works, at least not in this country. There's nowhere you can go and own property where you're not subject to some level of restriction from the state, the federal government, zoning, something. Does that make sense for everybody? This is about what the grantor restricts. In this case, what did the grantor restrict? Nothing. This is fee simple absolute.
So, fee simple absolute does not include any laws made by the state of North Carolina.
This is all about the interaction, but don't try to, that's a memorization question. It's not a bad question, but it's a memorization question. Okay. Don't try to remember that. Okay. This is about, did the grantor place any restrictions?
Okay.
That's the question. You know, don't try to memorize and say, oh, because then it could be covenants, and then it could be zoning, and then it could be, you can keep expanding those things. The key is that the grantor's not putting any of those in place.
Okay.
This is about what the grantor does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? We all good on that one now? Okay. Number 5, Christina is gifting a parcel of land to her cousin for a time period, right there, big, bold, red, for a what? Time period. So what are we talking about here? Some type of life estate. So now we need to know what? We know it's a life estate, we need to know if it's what? Conventional or for autre. So who's the life tenant here? The cousin. She's gifting the parcel of land to who? To her cousin for a period of time that will end. So the cousin's a life tenant that will end with the death of the cousin's oldest child. Who is the measuring life? The cousin's oldest child. Is that the same person or a different person? Different. So what kind of life estate is this? This is a per autre life estate. And now, what's the last question we need to answer? Is it remainder or does it revert? And it says at the conclusion of this time period, Christina expects that ownership will return to where? Her. So what is it? Reversionary. This is a life estate per autre with a reversionary interest. Are they starting to make a little more sense now? Yeah. That's why we do it. Good. Shanika has obtained ownership of a parcel of land which she's obligated to continue using for the purpose of a park if she wishes to maintain her ownership, her freehold interest. Freehold just means ownership, right? So if she wants to continue owning the thing, she has been told what she can do with the property. Which one is this? Fee simple determinable. And then finally, what are you left with? Life estate per autre with a what? Remainder interest. Thankfully, I would tell you, you would probably not see this one this complex by itself on a test. I did that to you because hopefully you were down to just this one. But if you filter through it, Teresa inherited ownership of a home when her mother passed away. Okay, that didn't tell me anything, right? Teresa's mother had inherited ownership of the home for the duration of her sister Tammy's lifetime. What do I know right there? We're dealing with a what? A life estate. Because anything for the duration of somebody's lifetime, for some limitation of time, is a life estate. So right there you know it's a life estate. Tammy is Teresa's aunt and is still alive, though living in a nursing facility. So go back. Who is the life tenant here? Teresa's mother, and then eventually Teresa. But either Teresa or Teresa's mother. Who's the measuring life? Tammy, right? Is that the same person or a different person? Different person. So are we talking conventional life estate or life estate per autre? Per autre. And then the question simply becomes, is it a remainder or a reversionary? Where's it going? Is it going back to where it came from, or is it going somewhere else? It's going somewhere else, so what's that called? Remainder. This is the life estate per autre with a remainder interest.
Can we have a printout of all those questions?
I will email you the scenario. Yep. Yep. Was that helpful? It's all right. It's not about feeling. It's about do you understand it better now than you did 20 minutes ago. That's what it's about. Okay? Okay? Good. Good. All right. So let's do this. Let's take a look at the quiz you took home. And then we should be set up ready to roll into chapter 3. This quiz on chapters 1 and 2 is short. Got a ton of questions. Now, one of the things I'm going to do for you guys in general is I like to show you how I take a standardized test as I go through it. Show you how I break questions down. We sort of just started doing that, right? You notice it's all about breaking things down. I'm going to do the same thing, so I'll mark this up to show you how I sort through. One of the surest things I can use to tell somebody pass the exam or not without even grading it, when I look at your tests. The ones that have no writing on them, I don't even need to grade them most of the time. You know what they are? They're fails. They are. When all you see is an answer circled or nothing else on the whole test, the thing comes back clean, it's a fail. If you like a clean sheet of paper, get over it. Mark it up. Underline words, circle words, write true and false. You know, give yourself some indications of what you're doing, working your way through these questions, because that's what you have to do. You have to pick them apart. If you learn how to pick them apart, they're not all that hard to answer. Some of the questions are going to be, which of the following is the best answer? Okay? Those are very tough questions to answer because obviously there could be more than one right answer and you have to choose from them. But most of them are set up in a format where there's only one correct answer. There's something wrong with the other answer choices. Here's where they throw you. They ask a lot of negatively phrased questions. How many of you like negative questions? Which of the following is not an example of this? Or all of the following are this except. How many of you love those questions, right? Here's the thing. Ignore that word. Ignore that word. Ignore the not, ignore the except. See, when you were in grade school, they told you to do what? Focus on that. Focus on that. Your brain doesn't work that way. Your brain does not think in negative terminology. Your brain is trying to answer a question, not answer a question. And it's very hard for you to think that way. Here's the thing. Whether they ask you for which of the following is true or which of the following is not true, here's what you know. Every single one of those answer choices is either true or what? False. 3 of them are going to be true and 1 false, or 3 false and 1 true. I don't care if the question says not or except. Ignore that. What you're going to do is label each individual answer choice as true or false, and then you're going to do what? Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. You're going to pick the one that's different. If there's 3 truths, which one are you going to choose? The false one. Do not attempt to answer these questions without working through them that way. Because what you will do is you will think you're looking for the true thing, and the first answer you read is true, and you jump on it, and you never look at the other ones and see that 2 more of them were true. And they were actually looking for the thing that was what? That was false. Discipline yourself. Test taking is about mental discipline. I wish I could tell you that I had to work hard for it. I didn't. It came easy. I'm just that guy. But I can tell you that's exactly how I do it. And it has served me well over the years. If you will start doing it that way, if you will focus in on it early on and get yourself in the habit of doing that, these tests become a lot easier to come around. Okay? So let's look at this. Which of the following items is most likely to be considered a fixture in North Carolina and thus transfer with the sale of real property? Number 1, first of all, what is a fixture? Before you even start reading answer choices, tell me what you know about fixtures. What is a fixture? Nailed, screwed, glued, or what? Buried in the ground. So it's got to be attached, and it was attached by who? The owner of the real property. That's what you know about a fixture. And see, you should do that too. When you see a question, you say, okay, this is a question about fixtures. You have this mental conversation. The best conversation I have all day, every day is the one with myself. You should learn to love talking to yourself in these tests. Because if you will sit there and say, this is what I know about fixtures, now haven't you laid out the groundwork for what you're looking for, right? You're looking for something that's nailed, screwed, glued, buried in the ground, and that was done by who? By the owner of the real property. Okay? Number 1, an award-winning rose bush planted by the seller after winning a horticulture contest at the North Carolina State Fair. Is it nailed, screwed, glued, or buried in the ground? Yes. Yeah, buried in the ground. Was it done by the owner of the real estate? Yes. Yes. Now it's a plant, so we have to ask one additional question. Does it require annual cultivation? No. So what is all that? Put it all together. Is that a fixture or not a fixture? That's a fixture. So you know, you label them whatever. I'll put fixture. NF for not fixture. A Japanese maple tree in a concrete plant has been located to the left of the stairs approaching the front porch. Nailed, screwed, glued, or buried in the ground? No, so it's not a fixture. Number 3, custom draperies that were hand-sewn to match the wallpaper in the dining room of a new construction model home. Nailed, screwed, glued, or buried in the ground? No, so what is it? Not a fixture or personal property. And number 4, an ornamental mailbox nailed by Mrs. Smith to the side of the home she's leased for the last 8 years in Garner. Nailed, screwed, glued, or buried in the ground? Yes. Was it placed there by the owner of the real property? No, so it's what? It's not a fixture. Look at that. One different. There's your answer. Good? Alright? Number 2. Which of the following is not an inheritable freehold estate? Well, we just went through all of these as far as what they were. Ownership is pretty much inheritable, is it not? This is one of those things I suggest you just memorize. There's only one type of ownership that is not inheritable, and what is it? The conventional life estate. Conventional life estate is not inheritable. Number 3, Bob, Mary, and Jonathan purchased a 15-acre industrial development together as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. Mary has some financial difficulties and is forced to sell her interest in the property to ABC Real Estate Holdings, Inc. Which of the following statements is correct regarding the transfer and the current state of ownership in the development? So I'm going to draw myself a little picture of this thing here. Everything's a pie chart, because a pie chart represents 100% of the ownership. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
How many owners do I have here? 3. And they're what kind of owners? Joint tenants. So what do we know about their ownership shares? They're equal. So I'm going to divide this pie into how many pieces? 3 equal pieces. Does that make sense? And the owners are Bob, Mary, and Jonathan, right? So we got Bob, Mary, and Jonathan. Everybody agree with that? They each own a third, and their relationship with each other is that they are what? Joint tenants. All the way around. Mary, and here's the reason I put this at the intersection, because what we would say is that Bob is a joint tenant with who? With John. Bob is also a joint tenant with Mary. Does everybody see that? That's why it's on those little intersecting lines like that. They're all joint tenants, they all have equal ownership shares. Everybody good? Okay? So that's how we start. What else do we know if they're joint tenants? It tells us anyway, but what do we know? They have the right of survivorship, which means if one of them were to what? Die, the other would automatically inherit that share of ownership. Everybody good with that? Okay? So, Mary has some financial difficulties and is forced to sell her interest in the property to ABC Real Estate Holdings, Inc. Can she do that? She can. So Mary goes away. And we get who? ABC. But now ABC did not purchase at the same time as Bob and John, so what's got to change about ABC's ownership? It cannot be joint tenancy, it has to be what? Tenancy in common. Now what about Bob and John? Are they still joint tenants with each other?
Yes.
They are. They are. So what we have right now is that Bob and John are joint tenants along with ABC, which is a what? Tenant in common. See, I know all of that without even looking at answer choices. Because you know what? Don't look at the answers for your answer. Because the answers are written specifically to what? Confuse you. That's why you need to work your way through it yourself. Okay? Plus, in some ways, multiple choice is harder, in some ways, for some people, than essay-style questions are. Because they rely too much on what's in front of them. Like, oh yeah, that's true. No, it's not. So now it says, which of the following statements is correct regarding the transfer and the current state of ownership of the development? Bob and Jonathan own their 10-acre portion as joint tenants. Can I stop right there? Yes, because Bob and Jonathan don't own a 10-acre portion. What do they each own? They each own a third of what? Of 15 acres. There's no such thing as dividing the property up. So that is a false statement right there. I can stop reading. That is a false statement. Number 2, the transfer to ABC Real Estate Holdings is invalid because joint tenants cannot individually transfer their ownership. Can I stop right there? Yes. Is that a false statement?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Because joint tenants can sell their ownership. Number 3, Bob, Jonathan, and ABC Real Estate Holdings will own the 15-acre development as tenants in common with no further right of survivorship. Well, that's the best one so far, but is there something wrong with it? Yes, because Bob and Jonathan are still what? Joint tenants, so we better hope number 4 is true. Bob, Jonathan, and ABC Real Estate Holdings will own the 15-acre development concurrently, which means at the same time, with Bob and Jonathan being joint tenants with each other, and ABC Real Estate Holdings being a tenant in common with them. Is that not exactly what we have already drawn in our picture there? Yes. It is, and that's the answer. Let me ask you a question just a little bit further on that. What would happen if Jonathan died? Bob would get what? All of Jonathan's share. So how much would Bob end up owning of the thing? 2/3, and ABC would own what? 1/3, and they would be what with each other? Tenants in common. Good. Good. Yes, sir, Jay.
Trying to think through, like, if you're gonna do that type of agreement with partners, why would you lock it on one month? Let that person sell whose interest in that property.
Right. So here, Dave's question, I forgot. Not to reveal my yeah. Dave's question was, if you were in this sort of a scenario where you had originally set up joint tenancy, why would you not, rather than allow Mary to sell to ABC, who you don't know anything about, why would you not buy it yourselves? But wouldn't it be in the best interest of Bob and Jonathan to buy that share themselves, especially since they have this right of survivorship with each other? And the answer is it probably would. In the real world, that's probably exactly what would happen, unless ABC just offered, vastly more than they were willing to pay. They couldn't afford it, whatever. Okay, so it's a really good question.
So I have a question.
Okay,
So you say if the Bob dies, then Jonathan will own
2/3
2/3, so, and then automatic will be a tenant in common.
with ABC.
There has to be sign up again, or it just automatic?
It just happens. Just happens. That's the thing about survivorship. It's automatic. It's like cruise control, right? When you have survivorship present, it takes care of, because now what happens if ABC dies? And how does a company die? It goes what? Out of business. What happens if ABC dies? The answer is we don't really know, right? It's going to go to whatever heirs or successors ABC Real Estate Holdings has. Does that make sense? See, the thing is, when you're talking about tenancy in common and you're not talking about survivorship, the answer is really you don't know what's going to happen. Whereas survivorship makes it very certain what the outcome is going to be.
So, once, let's say John dies and Bob is the last one there with ABC, at that point, I didn't realize that it would convert to a tenant in common. Convert to a tenant in common.
Well, it has to. How many owners are left? There are 2, and they didn't buy at the same time. So what do they have to be? Tenants in common, because joint tenants have to be what? Purchased at the same time. So there's no way around ABC being a tenant in common because they came into the party late. All right, number 4. Connie's granted ownership of a property for a defined amount of time. Well, we just went through this, right? So what are we talking about here? For a defined amount of time. Some type of life estate. With a deed that also includes provisions for a charity to obtain future ownership in the property. Is that a remainder or a reversionary? For a charity to obtain future ownership. Are we saying where it's going to go, or is it going back where it started? Saying where it's going to go. What is that called? Is that remainder or reversionary? That's a remainder. So we got some type of life estate with a what? Remainder interest. Well, look at the list. How many times do you see remainder interest as a choice? Once. We don't know if it's a life estate for autre because they didn't tell us enough. They didn't tell us who the measuring life was, but we didn't need to because we know it's a life estate, and we know it's a life estate with a remainder, and there's only one answer choice that actually has those 2 things combined. Does that make sense for you guys now? Okay. So that is a life estate with a remainder interest. It could be for autre, it could be conventional, we don't know. But it's the only one that says life estate and remainder. We know it's not reversionary, and we certainly know it's not fee simple absolute or fee simple determinable. Everybody good with that? Okay. Hopefully at least you got it down to a life estate. Yes ma'am, I'm sorry. From the charity, charities don't grant property over. They're not allowed to. That's where you're outthinking yourself. I can tell you, if they specify it's going to go here, they're talking about a remainder interest. Because if they said reversionary interest, they would just either not say, or they would say the word what, go back, or revert, or make it very clear that it's going back. They're not going to leave that up in question. Okay? All right, number 5. Karen and Tom purchased 123 Main Street together while they were engaged to be married. They were later married and lived in the home for 6 years. Now they've decided to purchase a second home on the coast in Atlantic Beach. Which of the following is untrue regarding the legal status of their ownership? That word untrue I'm going to ignore. I can't answer untrue. I'm just going to answer each one as true or false, and then I'm going to choose the one that's different. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So before I even start looking at answer choices, though, let's make myself a little timeline here. We know we bought 2 houses. We bought 123 Main, and we also bought what? Atlantic Beach later. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What happened in the middle of that, or where did it happen? We got married, and where did that happen? In the middle, right? Married. Just right there, don't you have kind of a visual image of something changing? Because we know anything to the right of that red line is going to be what? Tenancy by the entirety. And we know anything to the left is going to be anything other than tenancy by the entirety. Does that make sense for everybody? That line is a clear divider. So now let's look at the answer choices. Karen and Tom will own the Atlantic Beach home as tenants by the entirety. Is that a true statement? Yes. Yes, they purchased it after they were married. So that is definitely going to be tenancy by the entirety. So that's true. Number 2, the property at 123 Main Street could be owned concurrently by Karen and Tom as any of tenants in common, joint tenants, or tenants by the entirety. Is that a true statement? That is a true statement, because what could they have done if they wanted to? They could have changed it to include tenancy by the entirety. That is also a true statement. They could have been tenants in common, they could have been joint tenants, and they could have, after they were married, done what? Gone back and changed it. Number 3, Karen may elect to sell her interest in the Atlantic Beach property individually, provided she only conveys 50% ownership to the purchaser. Remind me, what kind of ownership is the Atlantic Beach property? Definitely tenancy by the entirety. Can she sell 50% of it by herself? No. So what is that statement? That is a very false statement. And then number 4, the home at 123 Main Street could have been purchased with unequal ownership shares. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Yes, because they bought it when? Before they were married, so they could have bought it as tenants in common with unequal shares. So I don't even need to look whether they're asking me for true or false, because there's only one that's what? False. That's the answer. Right. And what it says is the property at 123 Main Street could be owned. It didn't say could have been purchased. There's a difference. It could not have been purchased as tenants by the entirety. Does that make sense? But it could be owned as tenants by the entirety, because they can always go back and make that change. They can deed it to themselves. Just like we say, all right, let me ask you this question. Let's say that Jocelyn, Lynn, and Xenia purchase a property together as joint tenants. So how much do each one of them own? A third, right? And what do we know about is also present here? The right of survivorship. Okay, everybody good with me? Jocelyn sells her share to Chris. Can she do that? Yes. So now what do we know about the property? Xenia and Lynn each own how much still? 1/3, and they're what with each other? Joint tenants. But now Chris is a what? Tenant in common. Can they make him a joint tenant if they want to? Sure they can. See, that's where you got to broaden your horizons. They can go back and do what? They can redeed it to themselves. He can't do it on his own, but he would need them to participate. If they wanted to allow him to come in as a joint tenant, they could all redeed it to themselves, and would they have then purchased at the same time? Yes. Yes, because they'd all be on the same deed together. Does that make sense to everybody? See, don't think of these things as so blind structured. You can almost always go back and make changes. That's not what the questions are about. The questions are about what would happen at that point in time. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right, number 6. Elmer has inherited a vacant lot in Greensboro in which the grantor has stated the property may not be used for the purpose of developing a manufactured home park. Which of the following best describes this type of ownership? Is the grantor limiting something here? Yes. What are they limiting? Use. Are they saying what we can do or what we cannot do? What we cannot do, so which one is this? This is subject to a condition. Determinable is saying what you what? Can do. Subject to a condition says what you cannot do. Sure. So back to number 5, okay? No finance. We haven't done anything with finance. They can redeed it to themselves. Shh, guys. Stop. Which one are you looking at? I know question number 5, but which answer should we answer? Number 3, Karen may elect to sell her interest in the Atlantic Beach property individually, provided she only conveys 50% ownership. What kind of ownership do we know the Atlantic Beach property is? See, that's how I get to the root. That's how I get to the root of what you're struggling with. You're not struggling with what you asked me. You're struggling with the fact that it's tenancy by the entirety. And what does tenancy by the entirety mean? It takes how many to buy? No. It takes how many to buy? To buy. Not sell. How many to buy? One. And how many to sell? Two. So can she sell anything individually that's tenancy by the entirety? No. She needs who? Her husband. She needs her husband. That's why that statement's false. Because it says individually. It says she's selling her interest individually. There's no such thing. When you're married, you're not an individual. I hate to tell you. Not in the eyes of the state of North Carolina for property purposes. That's what the whole tenancy by the entirety means. It means you move as a block. You and your spouse are a block. Does that help? Okay.
Are you guys talking about?
Yes, she asked about number 5.
I really think the number 2.
You think that number 2 is also false, and why is that?
Yes, it says that the property on 23 Main Street will be owned currently by Karen and Tom as any of tenants in common.
Joint tenants or tenants by the entirety. And why do you think that's false?
Because it's only 2.
Why is it only 2?
Because we're talking about tenants in common, each month.
But you keep telling me that, but why do you think that?
Because it's sold one of the parts, right?
No, that doesn't have anything to do with selling one of the parts. You tell me why? Because they bought it when? They bought one after they were married, and they bought one when? Before. And you're right to make that differentiation, but it doesn't say the property was purchased as. joint tenants. It says it could be what? Owned. And what can they do? They can go back after they're married and what? Redeed it, which would have the effect of changing it to what? Tenants by, because if they redeed it to themselves, they just purchased it and they're what? What's their marital status? They're married, right? So if they redeed it to themselves while they're married, what's the title going to say? Tenants by the entirety.
So in that case, when they get married, it doesn't change automatically.
It doesn't change automatically. They have to go to the courthouse and redeed it to themselves. But they can do that. And that's why I put it on there specifically like that, because it forces you to think about this in broader terms, right? You have to think about the whole tenancy by the entirety thing. It's about what happens automatically because of their marital status when they purchase. Can they change it to anything else after the fact if they want to? Sure they can. Free country and all. They can go back if they want to be tenants by the entirety on stuff that they purchased previously. They can change it. They can redeed it to
So what
themselves.
I'm saying is that after they get married, one of them want to sell the previous house, they want to 3, then they're able to do it?
They are. Did y'all hear Maggie's question?
But they're married.
But I don't care. Because they are what? Either joint tenants or tenants in common, and joint tenants and tenants in common can always do what? They can sell their interest without the other's permission. So if they don't want their spouse to have that ability, what should they go do as soon as they file that marriage license? Redeed the property as what? Tenants by the entirety.
And if they never want to change it, so the house always belongs to the first person who bought it?
From a real estate question, what you just said is correct. From a marital standpoint, you got to talk to a divorce attorney and a divorce judge. Those are entirely different. I'm not teaching you divorce law in this class, okay? From a real estate standpoint, what you just said was correct. That's not going to be the effect of it because you've got marital law which overlays over it. I'm not here to answer questions about marital law. Yes, ma'am, right there.
I'm still on file, but I want to make sure I understand it.
Good, I want you to make sure you understand.
Can you tell me if this is your house?
Okay.
Inheritable home, purchased out before they got married, right?
Which house? Are we making up another one? 123, okay. All right.
As joint tenants
With the right of survivorship.
with survivorship,
Okay.
they're not married. So is it true that the only reason why they would need to change it from how they had it, which is joint tenants with survivorship, to tenants
By the entirety.
by the party is because they're just eliminating the right of the other person to sell without their permission, and also to
Bingo.
solidify the 50% ownership.
Bingo.
You know what I'm saying? Study.
Bingo. Bingo. Did everybody hear what Martina said? She said if they already had purchased as joint tenants with the right of survivorship, what would be the need to go back and change it to tenancy by the entirety? The answer to that question is you would be locking that down to make sure that that spouse could never do what? Sell their half without your permission. Well, she said survivorship was there. She did say that. She said they had already purchased with survivorship because she was trying to think in her mind, if I'm already joint tenants with survivorship, why bother to go back and change it? And the answer is to lock them down so that they can't sell their half without your permission. Because once it's tenancy by the entirety, they cannot do that. Is everybody following on that? You understand that a little bit better now? Good. Good. Yes, ma'am. Lynn. You're on question 6. Anybody else got a question about 5 before I jump to 6? Okay, let me scroll up to 6. What you got, London?
Or like some of the big websites, it would be some of the charges
Defeasible is the big category that includes determinable and subject to a condition. Those are, just like life estates have different types of life estates, fee simple, defeasible includes both of those. Those are types of fee simple, defeasible. So fee simple, determinable, and subject to a condition are both defeasible. Defeasible just means you can lose it. In other words, if you don't follow the rules, what happens to your ownership? It goes away. You lose it, right? So fee simple, determinable is a specific type of fee simple, defeasible. Sure.
I know this may be dumb, but I got really thrown, because I really went back and paid attention to the, the simple subject to a condition. But when I saw this word subsequent, because if I go back to your original part, the word subsequent wasn't on there, so that's.
And then there's subject to a condition, subsequent mean the same thing. Just like fee simple and fee simple absolute mean the same thing.
Okay, that's one thing that we, and so, because I didn't expect it, but I know.
Yeah. They're not going to always show up
The way that.
exactly, right? Because that word subsequent doesn't really mean anything. Because it's fee simple subject to a condition or it's fee simple determinable. So subject to a condition is enough to identify it. Does that make sense? All right, number 7. Barney has purchased a home located at 555 Oak Street in Raleigh, utilizing the standard offer to purchase and contract supplied by the North Carolina Association of Realtors. Here is your first introduction to what I call verbal diarrhea. Good for him that he used that contract. Do we really care? No. What do we care about that? He purchased the home. That's all we care about. I mean, that's the pertinent information. When the home was listed by the sellers, they instructed their listing broker that the chandelier in the dining room was not going to convey with the property because it belonged to the maternal grandmother and had sentimental value. Barney's purchase contract made no specific mention of the chandelier. Which of the following statements is true regarding the legal status of the chandelier? Don't look to their answers for your answer. You should be able to tell me, based on that, exactly what's going to happen with the chandelier. Ask yourself this question. Is the chandelier a fixture? Yes. So therefore, does it convey with the property from seller to buyer?
Yes.
Yes. Unless what? Unless it's excluded, specifically mentioned in the sales contract. Did that happen? No. So what is the legal status of the chandelier? It's gone. It belongs to who? It belongs to Barney the buyer. Does that make sense for everybody? So now I'm looking for an answer choice that lines up with that. The chandelier is a fixture and thus must be accepted in the sales contract if it will not convey with the property. Is that a true statement?
Yeah.
Yes. That's a very true statement. The chandelier will remain the personal property of the sellers. Can I stop right there?
Yes.
That's a false statement. Barney must complete a separate bill of sale to purchase the chandeliers if the sellers will agree. Must he do that? No, because he's already done what? He already bought the chandelier. It was part of the house. Number 4, the chandelier must be removed by the sellers prior to closing and a new fixture installed if they wish for it to remain their personal property. Is that true or false? That is false. When should they have removed it? Before the buyer made a what? An offer. You can't just go in there and start stripping stuff out of the house before closing. You got to leave the house the same as when they made their what? Offer. So if for this statement to be true, it would have needed to say the chandelier must have been removed by the sellers prior to either listing or prior to Barney making what? An offer, or prior to showing the property. Does that all that make sense? You can't just do it before closing. Look, and which is exactly what number 1 says. The chandelier is a fixture and thus must be what? Accepted or taken out, excluded, means the same thing if it's not going to convey. Number 1's the only one that's true. Yes, ma'am. Fixtures are included in the transaction. Personal property is excluded. So why would you mention a fixture in the contract? To say it doesn't go. Why would you mention personal property in the contract? To say it does go. Good. Good. Yes, sir, I bet. Okay. Isaiah's question is somebody in trouble here? What's the answer to that question? Yes. clearly the listing broker did not do their job very well. Does that make sense? So we haven't talked about agency yet, but might we have something called like an agency law violation or a commission rule violation, or could the listing broker be sued by the seller because they didn't represent their best interest? Absolutely, but none of that impacts the buyer. The agreement between the buyer and the seller is very clear. The fixtures go with the property. Okay? Everybody good?
Yes.
All right. And then number 8, last one. Which of the following would not be considered an appurtenance to a parcel of real estate? Which of the following is not considered an appurtenance to a parcel of real estate? And number 1 says a crop of corn planted by a farmer who's marketing his land for sale. Is a crop real property or personal property? Personal. So is personal property an appurtenance, or is it just personal property? It's personal property. So that's going to be false. That's personal property. Number 2, oil and gas rights that have been sold to a gas exploration company. Are oil and gas rights an appurtenance? Yes, they are. Whether they've been sold or not does not matter. Oil and gas rights are always an what? An appurtenance. So that is true. Number 3, a warehouse constructed on a parcel of commercial property. Is that an appurtenance? Yes, it is. That one is true. And number 4, covenants or restrictions imposed by a homeowners association. Are covenants or restrictions appurtenant? Are they attached forever? They are. True. So the only one that's not is number 1. That's it. How'd you do? Good. Hopefully once we've gone through and talked about it, you get a broader understanding, a little bit better where we are. Everybody feel good about that? Okay, good. So last thing I want to go over real quickly, and then we'll take our first break of the morning, kind of break off clean with stuff from last week. You went home with some concurrent ownership questions, is that right? So these deal with the different types of concurrent ownership, so tenancy in common, joint tenancy, tenancy by the entirety. Number 1, since Sam and Lisa purchased a home together months after they were married, 2 months after they were married, what's the type of ownership they have? Well, what is it? Tenancy by the entirety, so that's the answer to the first half of the question. And then what percentage of ownership does each have? 50%. Oh, I changed colors. Don't we have to click a different color? I read it different places. Greatest invention in the history of the world, by the way. The surface, so I don't have to write on this thing anymore. I don't have to turn my back to you and talk at the wall. Number 2, in the above question, this is a second marriage for Sam, and he has a will that states his children will get all of his assets upon his death. What does this do to the status of the ownership if Sam were to die before Lisa? Does it do anything? Does the will affect it at all? No, because it's what kind of ownership? Tenancy by the entirety, which means we automatically have what? Survivorship. So when Sam dies, what happens? Lisa gets it. When she dies, it goes to her heirs, whoever her heirs might be, and might her heirs not be his children. Goes to her heirs. Let's see, I didn't print any extras. I emailed it out. Did you get the email? You did not? If you didn't get emails from me, if you haven't gotten several emails from me, you need to see me because I clearly have a wrong email address for you. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So, my question, let's just say he had purchased the home and then married.
See you there, okay. I know.
So,
everybody loves to ask this stuff because it happens in the real world. Make sure you're asking a real estate question, not a marital, I need Judge Judy question, okay? You have to rein it in on these things, okay? So if he bought it with her,
second wife.
But he bought, no, you haven't got there yet. See, now you're climbing it up. He bought the property by himself or with her?
Well, with his first wife.
He bought it with his first wife, so it's what?
The first wife is gone, she's the second wife.
No, we've got to deal with the property first, so you can't just jump ahead. He bought the property with his wife, right? So it is tenancy by the what? Entirety. Now, he's gotten divorced.
Right.
That's what you just said, right?
Right.
I'm putting it in line. You were all over the place with it. It's okay. My job is to put it in line. He got divorced. What has to change? It can't be what? It cannot be tenancy by the entirety anymore. So now you have to tell me from there what happens. See, you can't go further with your question. You tell me what happens from there. What happened after the divorce? Your story.
He remarried.
I don't want to know what happened with his life. I want to know what happened with the property the day they got divorced. Because that tenancy by the entirety has to go away. So what happened?
It goes back to him for
So he gets the whole thing. How? She give it to him?
When she died.
Oh, now you won't kill her. Okay. So, did they get divorced or she died?
She died.
She died. They didn't get divorced. She died. Okay, because it's different, right?
Yeah.
So now she died, so he has 100% ownership of the property. So then she doesn't matter anymore, okay? In any way. All right, so now he has 100% ownership of the property. And keep going.
And now he has a new wife.
Now he got married again, so new wife has what?
Well, they redeeded tenancy in common.
No, they can't redeed as tenancy in common.
Even though she didn't purchase at the same time.
If they're redeeding, what are they? And after they got married, what are they redeeding as?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Tenancy by the entirety.
But if she didn't redeed it.
If she didn't redeed, then who owns it? He does. Now, that's the real estate. That's the end of the real estate question. See, everything after that is marital law. And that's where you have to discipline yourself. We know that marital law is going to give her a 50% interest, but from a real estate standpoint, he's still the owner in several. Does that make sense?
So you have to redeed for that.
Tenancy by the entirety. Yeah. Yep. Yes, sir, Mike.
So divorcing or widowing is a mandatory reworking of
Dissolution of tenancy by the entirety. Tenancy by the entirety goes away the moment you're not married to that person anymore. So part of the divorce filing will be a redeeding of the property. They're either going to be redeeded as tenants in common if they're going to continue to own it together, or joint tenants. Does that make sense for everybody? One of those two. Or more likely, what usually happens in a divorce proceeding as far as the real property goes. They give it to what? One or the other, or they force a sale of the property. Because generally speaking, these people are not going to be a good fit for continuing to own property together. Does that make sense? But practically speaking, the tenancy by the entirety has to go away. So it's going to be redeeded one way or the other. It's either going to be one's going to gift the ownership over to the other, whether they want to or not. It's part of the divorce decree, right? One's going to transfer ownership over to the other. One's going to buy the other out, or both of them are going to sell the property. But one way or another, as soon as that divorce is final, the tenancy by the entirety has to go away. It cannot stay tenancy by the entirety, because the first rule of tenancy by the entirety is you must be what? You must be married. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. If Sam passed away, his will stated that all the gods have were his children, but his deed is that him and his wife, they were tenants in entirety. His assets all go to her. Meaning that she...
That's marital law question. All I care about is the real estate.
If Lisa gets it all...
Of the property.
Of the property.
That's what I'm talking about, the property.
The property's not, maybe I missed it, I apologize. The property's not an asset?
The property is not an asset to the children because they can't get it. See, you're not getting the idea of survivorship. Survivorship happens instantly as soon as he dies. And so since they're tenants by the entirety, what happens to his ownership instantly the moment that he dies? It goes to his surviving owner, which is going to be his spouse.
We're only talking about a house here, right?
We're talking about this piece of property. We're talking about that one piece of property. And that's what you have to do. You have to remember you're being asked a real estate question, not a marital dissolution of assets question. Because those are much more complex. Yes?
So, this is probably different to be say he dies and she gets the property, she cannot change the survivor survivorship of it.
There is no more survivorship.
Well, if it was stated to be inherited by the children, but it's still there's still an entity,
What do you mean there's still an entity within?
Yes.
The children are like, it doesn't matter.
The will doesn't matter. That's the whole point of survivorship.
That's the trick.
The whole point of there's no trick. If you think of it as a trick, then you haven't yet made peace with the idea of survivorship. What is the very point of survivorship? Help them out. To avoid what? A will. To avoid the will. We're literally saying we don't care what the will says, because we want this property owned in such a way that when one of us dies, the other is going to what? Automatically get it. We don't care if they ever open the will. If they do open the will, it doesn't matter to us because the property's already been transferred. That's what survivorship is. So you have to make peace with that, because what they're going to do is throw at you all these wills, and what you have to keep saying is that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because of the survivorship. Survivorship's like an ironclad promise between those two people. If something happens to me, it goes to you. Period.
So if they both decided that the property was going to be inherited by their children,
They would have to redeed it to themselves and get rid of the survivorship. That's the only way they can do it.
okay, and then if one of them died, the other couldn't change those stipulations after the fact.
No, because there's nothing to change, because it happens the instant the other one dies. See, the instant one dies, the new one is the sole owner. Instantly. You take your last breath, survivorship kicks in, you're the sole owner. How do you change any type of ownership? You redeed the property, and what type of ownership doesn't have survivorship? Tenants in what? In common. Tenants in common.
So they can just split, even though they're married, they can just.
No. No, 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 no. They cannot be married and redeed it to themselves as anything other than tenants by the entirety. If you get a deed in your name and you are married, what is that deed going to be? Tenants by the entirety. There is no changing out of tenancy by the entirety if you are married. Y'all don't understand this whole idea of marriage. No, you cannot take the survivorship out. You can't do anything if you're married, in a lot of ways, right? You are tied to that person like an anchor. You don't do anything without them when you're married to them from a real estate perspective, because you operate as one group until you are no longer what? Married to that person. Period. Amen. In the discussion. You have to think of it that way. If we are married and the title comes into our name while we are married, it is going to be tenancy by the entirety. It is going to have survivorship. It is going to be 50-50, and a will is not going to matter, and there is nothing we can do to change it. Nothing. Besides get what? Unmarried. That's it. That's the way it works. It's that ironclad. It'll say it's tenants by the entirety. Geraldine's question is, what's the deed going to say? It'll say Jane and John Doe, husband and wife, as tenants by the entirety. If it was Jane Doe and John Smith, comma, unmarried, as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. Of course, because the thing that matters is what? Whether they are what? Whether they're married. It's free advertising. It's going to say. Your deed's always going to give your marital status. Always. Or tenancy in common, it's going to identify the type of ownership. Absolutely. If you all want to look up, pull up your deed on, if you live in Wake County, the Wake County Register of Deed, it'll say exactly what type of ownership you have.
Has that always been?
Always. Well, not always, but for several hundred years.
Because my mom and dad are married, and my dad always said that's his house.
I don't care what your daddy said.
Yeah.
Work that way. Lots of people say lots of things, right? Find out differently, and that's what you have to understand. You know, it's all about, from a real estate perspective, it's all about when you purchase, were you married to that person or not? Okay, that's the jumping off point. Yes, ma'am, Martina.
I think this is clear, because I keep getting the same question. I think we're not understanding that, some people are understanding that, with the marriage and with the ownership, when one person lies, the other person, the one that's dead, doesn't matter anymore. So they don't have any property together. It's just the one person.
That's it.
Married couple. So, like, I think it's a clear cut for them, just understand that they are married. When one dies, it doesn't matter about their will, their heirs, and their kids, and their mom. It doesn't matter. It's just the
From a real estate perspective, that's exactly right.
This is the one we carried out at the end of the half to know that it was the life of the married couple.
Right.
It's the one person.
From a legal perspective, your spouse dying is like you cutting off your arm. You're still alive. Does that make sense? Like nothing changes legally about you. Literally, just everything that was you and your spouse together is now you singular. And it happens instantly. That's the whole idea of survivorship. Yes, ma'am. It joins to whatever they want it to be. If they're going to remain owning the property. So you're saying they're going to remain owning the property together? First of all, it's a really bad idea. Really bad idea. I mean, these people hate each other enough to get divorced. You tell me they're going to be good owners together of a property? Because remember, if you are an owner, you have the right to occupy the property how much of the time? All the time. So when she's there with her boyfriend, he's just going to show up right in the middle of things. That's going to go over well, right? And he has every legal right to do so, does he not? That's a bad idea. But if they wanted to be silly, they could, and they would be either joint tenancy or tenancy in common, because it could not remain what? Tenancy by the entirety. Didn't they buy it together? Because they can choose to be tenants in common. It's their choice. There's no rule that says just because you bought at the same time you have to be joint tenants. You only are joint tenants if you want what? Survivorship. And I'm pretty much assuming they don't want survivorship anymore. If they're getting divorced, do they want their half of anything to go to that person when they die? No, they want it to go where? Somewhere else. So if they did keep the property together, what is the high likelihood they're going to be? Tenants in what? In common. Tenants in common. That's all I have.
I did.
Yes.
She asked the question, you answered it, but I did have another question in regards to that. When two people are married, they divorce, and they can do one of three things. They can redeed it either as joint tenants or tenants in common.
Yep.
One can either sell it
To the other.
and do a quick claim deed, and then, no, one can either sell it to the other one, or they can just sell it all together.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
All right,
correct.
so
They
it's
have,
what they
they
want
have
to
to
do.
do something that eliminates the only thing that's not an option is remaining tenants by the entirety. Everything else is on the table. However else they want to continue.
Okay.
Okay? All right, number 3. Brad, Sally, and Kevin purchased a 20-acre property together without specifying the type of ownership they would like to have. Are Brad, Sally, and Kevin married?
No.
No. They didn't specify the type of ownership. What are they going to be? Tenants in what? Common. That's the default for unmarried people. So they're tenants in common. Brad owns 50% of the total property, and Sally and Kevin each own 25%. Is that possible in tenants in common? Yes, it is. That's the only reason you know it's tenancy in common, because it's the only one that has unequal shares like that. Based on this information, what will be the legal status of the ownership if Sally were to die? Well, if we're talking about tenancy in common, what's always the status when somebody dies? It goes to their what? It goes to their heirs. Because there is no survivorship. So, the legal status of ownership is going to be that Brad has what? His 50%. Kevin has what? His 25%. And then Sally's heirs have 25%. And they are all what with each other? Tenants in common. No ma'am. No ma'am. You never have to leave a will. As long as you're okay with who being your heir. The state of North Carolina. So should Sally leave a will? That's a different question. The answer is yes. Doesn't have to then. Yes, ma'am, Brittany.
I had a question. So, I knew the answer was Tennessee got
Tenancy in common?
Tennessee in common, but I got a question. As far as say this exact question was on the test, are you looking for? And I heard you say if the person have marks on their paper, 9 times out of 10 they understand, they know what's going on, and you want to know the answer. So, are you looking for us to put Brad 50%, Kevin 25%, and Sam?
Most likely, that one of the answer choices is going to be that Brad owns 50%, Kevin owns 25%, and Sally's heirs own 25%, all as tenants in common.
I only say that because I only wrote tenants in common. So I didn't know if you were-
That's okay. That's fine. If you just wrote tenants in common, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the percentages would stay the same.
So question about the same thing, so this is what you want for this, but it's, it becomes this kind of a question of reading the test of what's the right thing to do.
Well, you mean what's the right thing to do? There's only going to be one that's the right answer. So one answer, of course, it's multiple choice, right? So only one of them's going to have it may just say tenants in common. It may say tenants in common with Brad owning 50% and Kevin owning 25%. It may just say Sally's heirs are a tenant in common owning 25%. It can say any of those things, but all of those statements would be true, and there's only going to be one true statement. There's no one correct answer. There will only be one of their answers that is correct. That's kind of why we do it open-ended, so you have to think through all the different possibilities. All right. Number 4, Thomas, Jeff, and George all purchased property together as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. The 100-acre parcel of land is a hunting preserve in Edgecombe County. Jeff has decided to sell his ownership interest to Samantha. What's the legal status of the ownership of the property? So Thomas, Jeff, and George, how many of them? 3 purchased property together as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. So they each own how much? 33.3%, a third, right? Yeah. So we've got something that looks like this. Oops, wrong. That's something that looks like this, right? Yeah. And we've got Thomas, Jeff, and George, and they're all joint tenants with each other. Jeff has decided to sell his ownership interest to Samantha. So Jeff goes away and Samantha comes in. What does that do to the joint tenancy here? Turns it into what? Tenancy in common. What does it do to it here? Turns it into tenancy in common. It leaves the joint tenancy between Thomas and George because they what? They bought at the same time, so they remain joint tenants. That means they keep the right of what? Survivorship. Is everybody good on that? Yes. Okay. What's the legal status of the ownership of the property? Well, Thomas, George, and what's her name? Samantha all own what? 1/3, 33%, however you want to say it. Thomas and George are what? Joint tenants, and Samantha is a tenant in common. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about number 3.
Okay.
Now this is what I put. Sally's undivided interest passes to her heirs for appropriate proceeding, but Sally's interest doesn't pass to another co-owner or a tenant in common unless Brad or Kevin are heirs in Sally's will or are purchasing Sally's share.
That's a very detailed answer, yes, absolutely. And it's all correct. I mean, it's a great answer. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that statement. The whole idea here is going to Sally's heirs, whoever those happen to be. You don't have to worry about who those are. I mean, could Sally's heirs be Brad? Sure, but it's still Sally's heirs. Having Brad as an heir is very different than having Brad as a survivor. Because survivorship happens when? Instantly. If you have him as an heir, when's he going to actually get her ownership interest? Long time from now, after the whole estate goes through what? Probate. So, yes, she could name him as her heir, but that's vastly different than survivorship. Right? All right. And then the question above, what would be the legal status of the ownership if Thomas were to die after the sale of Jeff's portion to Samantha? So poor Thomas is dead, right? What happens to the ownership? Well, here's the first thing that happens. George gets Thomas's share, right? because of the survivorship, and what goes away? The joint tenancy, so what are we left with? Tenancy in common. So now George owns what? 2/3, and Samantha owns what? 1/3, and they're what with each other? Tenancy in common. So you got George, 2/3 or 67%, Samantha, 1/3 or 33%, and they are as tenants in common. Yes, sir.
What's the only way that
What's the way that George would benefit from owning a bigger percentage? If they rent the property out, how much of the rent is he going to get? 2/3. If they sell the property, how much of the proceeds is he going to get? 2/3. That's the benefit of owning a greater percentage. Obviously not use-wise, because they both get use of the whole property. But from an income perspective, it makes a big difference. You gotta pay 2/3 of the property taxes. Indeed, please come with a dog, right? Okay? Good. Do we have a better understanding of what we talked about last week? See, it's not about memorization, folks. It is about application. You have to dive deep into this material. Now, I just gave you some insight on what you should be studying from chapters 1 and 2 for the final exam. What did we spend the whole morning almost talking about from chapters 1 and 2? Ownership estates, so the difference between life estates, fee simple to feasible and fee simple absolute, and then what else? The concurrent ownership, so tenancy in common, joint tenancy, tenancy by the entirety. Those are the big letter topics. So right now, if you want to start making a to-do list for yourself as far as studying, there's your topics for chapters 1 and 2. Those are the ones that you're going to be asked about on the test. Okay? Let's take a break. I want to come back at 11 o'clock.